Russia tomorrow.
So how would you evaluate the situation at the front right now? Who is winning the war?
At the moment, it is a grinding war. There is attacks from Russia in the Bakhmut area, for example. There are slow advances to great costs, enormous amounts of casualties, soldiers killed and wounded on the Russian side, a lot of equipment lost. So I would say there is, as I say, slow advancement, but to great cost. I would say that Russia so far has strategically, operationally, and tactically has not been very successful so far. So, and on the other hand, the Ukrainians have been successful in the sense that 40% of the territory that Russia took after 24 February, they have retaken, and they are fiercely defending their country, and of course are looking at retaking what is legally theirs.
Do you support the delivery of fighter jets to Ukraine? Because this is one of the main topics of the conversations here, for example, in Munich, and also this long-range systems, which are very important, as Ukrainians say, for going on with the war and for the success at the front. Would you personally support this delivery, and as a representative of NATO?
Well, the first, I think it's very important to make clear that over time Ukraine has asked many things and has received many things, and it is up to the nations that will or will not deliver certain weapon systems to make that decision. That is not a NATO decision, it is a decision by the nations. That's one. So NATO is not playing a role in the coordination of how the lethal aid, the weapon systems, that is done by the US through the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. So that's not a task of NATO. It is at the moment extremely important for Ukraine to have sufficient modern air defense systems, because their ability to counter those 2 weekly missile strikes is actually, if they're unable to do that, then that is a game changer in the war. So the most important weapon system for the Ukrainian armed forces is air defense systems. And so that's one. And then all the other things that we are doing now is to look constantly at what the Ukrainian government is asking, and the nations are responding to that. And we see that through the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. 50 nations, so it's not only NATO, it is 50 nations in the world, also from Asia. It's not the West against Russia, it is not NATO against Russia. It is 50 democratic nations supporting Ukraine in their ability to defend themselves.
But when you talk about this defense systems, doesn't it mean that Ukraine will keep defending itself, but will not have an opportunity to attack, to counterattack, and to end this war? I mean, they all complain about that, right? Not all of them, but some of the representatives of Kiev, they complain in a good sense of this word, saying that, listen, guys, if you all want to stop it, you need to help us.
So, but there's huge efforts to actually help Ukraine in their ability to conduct counteroffensives. So we have had the discussion on tanks. It took a while, and that is normal because it is a modern weapon system, and it is understandable that the nations think carefully about what they give away. And so we have had that discussion. There's a decision, and now the West, let's say out of those 50 nations, there's a considerable number of nations that are now giving tanks to Ukraine. And those tanks are part of combined arms operations that the Ukrainians are preparing themselves for. And that is a combination of tanks, fires, which is artillery, for example, and HIMARS systems, and of course infantry. And the three things together will make the Ukrainians much more successful in their counteroffensive. So all the efforts are now focused on that, to make sure that Ukraine has the ability to conduct combined arms operations on the ground. And if we're successful in doing that, and that's not only weapon systems, that is also training, that is also ensuring that they can sustain those weapon systems, that they can repair it, that there is sufficient spare parts. And the training is not only on the weapon systems that we give them, but also in this combined arms operations. Because we see on the Russian side, it's only tanks, it's only artillery, or it's only infantry. And the ability of the Russian army to conduct combined arms operations, actually we haven't seen that.
But do you think that when it comes to the fighter jets, that the process may be the same as with the tanks? So after some time, the decision will be made by the US and Germany, or separately by different countries. How do you see the prospects?
Again, it's up to the nations. It's not something NATO will decide. And the discussion will go on as it has happened with the tanks, and we'll see what the outcome is.
How do you think the war ends? Do you think it ends during the 2023?
I don't think it is helpful per se to talk about the end date of a war, because nobody can predict that.
Sure.
And at the moment, both on the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, we do not see a willingness to come to the negotiation table. So for now, the war will continue. And it is therefore extremely important that we continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. And we should mentally prepare ourselves to be in this for the long haul. And of course, everybody hopes it will end as soon as possible. I think the Ukrainians want this to end as soon as possible. And as I said, if the Russians stop the war today and go home, the war is over. They have less friends. I think that is obvious. And therefore, for them, it is extremely difficult to find those weapons and ammunition. But never underestimate the Russians. I think that is an important thing as well. In the history, we have seen that Russia is very resilient and is able to, from a very low point, can build up again. So we are not underestimating the Russians. I am not underestimating the Russians. NATO is not underestimating the Russians. Therefore, we are going on with this refocusing on our collective defense, on strengthening our deterrence and defense posture, to be ready if the Russians would choose to go to NATO. And so far we don't see that, and therefore we are not at war, I cannot say it enough, with Russia, but the nations are helping Ukraine to defend itself.
We operated in Russia for 12 years, and the government tried to get rid of us 3 times.
We had to leave, forced out of the country by new repressive laws after the first week of the war. Our freedom crushed by the authorities.
Мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We survived, started working from Europe, and now we are watched by millions of people every day.
There's no other independent news channel in Russian. We have now decided to tell the truth about Russia in English as well.
So that you could get news about Russia, the war in Ukraine, and Russian society directly from the source.
We want to tell you firsthand what is really happening in Russia. Subscribe to TV Rain Newsroom on YouTube, and let's take a look at our future together.